Buddhism, one of the world's oldest and most profound philosophical traditions, offers timeless wisdom for navigating life's challenges. At its core, the teachings focus on understanding the mind, reducing suffering, and cultivating inner peace. By embracing key principles, individuals can learn to remain unaffected by external circumstances, leading to a balanced and harmonious life. Here are 4 fundamental Buddhist principles that help ensure that nothing can truly affect you. 1. The principle of impermanence, anicca. One of the foundational teachings of Buddhism is that everything is impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. This concept, known as anicca, teaches that all things, whether physical or mental, are in a constant state of flux. Relationships, material possessions, emotions, and even our physical bodies are subject to change. By deeply understanding and accepting impermanence, we can cultivate a more balanced and non-attached mindset. The pain and suffering often arise from our resistance to change. We cling to things, expecting them to stay the same, and when they don't, we suffer. By embracing the transient nature of life, we free ourselves from the anxiety and disappointment that come with clinging to things as they are. For example, in moments of joy, recognizing that the joy is impermanent helps us appreciate it more fully without becoming attached. Similarly, in times of hardship, remembering that this too shall pass can alleviate some of the burden. Understanding impermanence helps us cultivate equanimity, remaining steady and balanced, regardless of the situation. 2. The principle of non-self, anatta. In Buddhism, the notion of the self is seen as a construct, an illusion. The principle of anatta, or non-self, teaches that there is no permanent, unchanging essence or identity that defines who we are. We often believe that there is a solid, unchanging I, or self, that persists through life, but Buddhism encourages us to see this as a misunderstanding. The attachment to the idea of a permanent self leads to suffering. We define ourselves by our thoughts, emotions, achievements, and possessions, and when these are threatened or lost, we feel pain. By realizing that the self is fluid and ever-changing, we loosen the grip of ego and the suffering associated with it. This understanding helps us to navigate life's challenges with greater ease, because we are no longer rigidly attached to the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. When faced with criticism, failure, or loss, the principle of non-self reminds us that these events do not define us. We are not our failures, nor are we our successes. This perspective brings a sense of freedom and peace, allowing us to engage with life's ups and downs without becoming entangled in them. 3. The principle of mindfulness, sati. Mindfulness, or sati, is the practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It is a key aspect of Buddhist teachings and is considered essential for cultivating wisdom and reducing suffering. By being mindful, we learn to observe our thoughts, emotions, and experiences as they arise without getting lost in them or reacting impulsively. Mindfulness helps us stay centered and calm in the face of adversity. Instead of being swept away by strong emotions or negative thoughts, we can step back and observe them. This creates a gap between the stimulus, the event or emotion, and our response, giving us the space to choose how we react. In this way, mindfulness allows us to navigate life with more grace and composure. For example, if someone says something hurtful, mindfulness can help us recognize the initial emotional reaction without immediately lashing out or becoming defensive. By observing the emotion, perhaps anger or sadness, we can choose a more skillful response, one that aligns with our values and brings less harm to ourselves and others. Mindfulness is also a powerful tool for reducing stress and anxiety. By staying present and focusing on the here and now, we avoid the trap of dwelling on past regrets or worrying about future uncertainties. This grounded presence helps us remain unshaken by external events, as we are no longer living in the realm of hypothetical fears or past traumas. The principle of compassion, karuna. Karuna, or compassion, is another central principle in Buddhism that helps us remain unaffected by external circumstances. Compassion, in the Buddhist sense, is the desire for all beings to be free from suffering. This includes cultivating kindness and understanding toward ourselves as well as others. When we practice compassion, we shift our focus away from self-centered concerns and instead consider the well-being of others. This shift in perspective helps us develop a greater sense of empathy and connection with the world around us. By cultivating compassion, we can respond to difficult situations with kindness rather than anger or resentment. Compassion also applies to how we treat ourselves. In times of personal hardship, we can practice self-compassion by acknowledging our pain and responding to it with care rather than harsh self-criticism or judgment. When we learn to treat ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a dear friend, we become more resilient in the face of life's challenges. For instance, if someone is acting out of anger, practicing compassion allows us to recognize that their behavior is likely a reflection of their own suffering. Instead of reacting with hostility, we can respond with understanding, knowing that they are struggling. This doesn't mean we condone harmful behavior, but it helps us remain calm and composed rather than being affected by their negativity. Integrating these principles into daily life. While these four principles, impermanence, non-self, mindfulness, and compassion, are rooted in Buddhist teachings, they offer universal wisdom that can be applied to anyone's life, regardless of their spiritual background. By integrating these principles into our daily lives, we can cultivate a sense of inner peace that remains steady despite the external chaos. Accept impermanence. The next time something changes unexpectedly, remind yourself that change is the natural state of all things. This can help reduce the shock and anxiety that often accompany transitions. Let go of the self. When you find yourself overly attached to a particular identity or outcome, reflect on the fluid nature of the self. Ask yourself if this momentary challenge truly defines who you are. Practice mindfulness. Set aside time each day to practice mindfulness, whether through meditation or simply paying attention to your thoughts and emotions as they arise. This will strengthen your ability to remain present and non-reactive. Cultivate compassion. In difficult moments, both with yourself and others, choose kindness. Remember that everyone, including you, is doing the best they can with the resources they have. Through consistent practice, these principles can lead to a life where external events no longer have the power to disturb your inner peace. Instead of being buffeted by the waves of life, you can learn to ride them with calmness, clarity, and compassion. The principle of the middle way, Majjhima Patipada. One of the most fundamental teachings in Buddhism is the middle way, or Majjhima Patipada. This principle advocates for a path of balance between extremes, avoiding both indulgence in sensory pleasures and the harshness of self-denial. The Buddha discovered the middle way after experiencing both a life of luxury and a period of extreme asceticism. He realized that neither extreme brought true liberation, and instead, one must follow a balanced approach to achieve spiritual progress. The middle way encourages us to avoid extremes in our daily lives, whether it's in our thoughts, emotions, or behaviors. When we become too attached to pleasure, we suffer when it fades. Similarly, if we subject ourselves to extreme hardships, we also create unnecessary suffering. By finding the middle path, we navigate life with greater balance, neither overly excited by pleasures nor devastated by pain. For example, in our daily lives, this principle can be applied by moderating our desires. If we constantly chase material wealth or status, we set ourselves up for disappointment because these things are impermanent. On the other hand, rejecting all desires and becoming overly ascetic can lead to a life of deprivation and resentment. By embracing the middle way, we find contentment and peace in moderation, reducing the impact that external circumstances have on our mental state. 6. The principle of cause and effect. Karma. Karma, often misunderstood, is one of the most important principles in Buddhism. It refers to the law of cause and effect, which states that our actions, whether physical, verbal, or mental, have consequences. Karma teaches that every intentional action we take creates a corresponding result, either in this life or a future one. The key point is that we are responsible for our actions and the outcomes that follow them. Understanding the principle of karma can help us remain unaffected by external circumstances because it gives us insight into how our actions shape our experiences. When we accept that our present situation is the result of past actions, we can stop blaming external factors or people for our suffering. This empowers us to take responsibility for our future by choosing more skillful actions in the present moment. For instance, if we are experiencing difficulty at work or in a relationship, we can reflect on the choices we've made that may have led to the current situation. By acknowledging our role in creating our circumstances, we can take proactive steps to improve the future, rather than reacting emotionally or feeling helpless. Karma teaches us to act with mindfulness, kindness, and compassion, knowing that these positive actions will yield positive outcomes in the long term. At the same time, karma also helps us develop patience and understanding when facing challenges. If something negative happens, we can view it as a result of past actions and accept it as part of the process, rather than reacting with frustration or anger. This acceptance allows us to remain calm, knowing that we can change the course of future events through better actions now. 7. The principle of non-attachment. Upadana. One of the core teachings of Buddhism is that suffering arises from attachment. This principle, known as Upadana, explains that we cling to people, objects, ideas, and even our sense of identity, believing that they will bring us lasting happiness. However, because everything is impermanent, our attachments inevitably lead to disappointment and suffering. Non-attachment doesn't mean that we should reject or avoid relationships, possessions, or experiences. Instead, it means approaching them without clinging or becoming overly dependent on them for our sense of well-being. When we practice non-attachment, we engage with life fully, but we do so with the understanding that everything is temporary and that our happiness does not depend on external circumstances. For example, we might become attached to a particular outcome at work, such as getting a promotion. If we tie our self-worth or happiness to that outcome, we suffer if things don't go as planned. Non-attachment allows us to work toward our goals without becoming overly fixated on the results. We can enjoy the process and be content with whatever outcome arises, knowing that our inner peace does not depend on external validation. Non-attachment also applies to relationships. While it's natural to care for others deeply, clinging to them or relying on them for our emotional security leads to suffering when circumstances change. By practicing non-attachment, we can love others freely without becoming possessive or fearful of losing them. This brings a sense of freedom and peace, allowing us to navigate relationships with more compassion and understanding. 8. The principle of loving kindness, metta. Metta, or loving kindness, is a foundational Buddhist practice that involves cultivating unconditional love and goodwill toward all beings. This principle encourages us to develop a heart that is open and kind, regardless of how others treat us or what circumstances we face. When we practice loving kindness, we generate feelings of warmth, compassion, and kindness toward ourselves and others, without expecting anything in return. Loving kindness is a powerful tool for remaining unaffected by external negativity. In many situations, we become upset or disturbed because of how others behave toward us. We may react with anger, resentment, or hurt. However, when we practice metta, we train ourselves to respond to all beings with kindness, even those who may have wronged us. This shift in perspective helps us let go of emotional reactions and remain grounded in our own inner peace. For example, if someone acts rudely toward us, instead of reacting with anger or taking it personally, we can respond with loving kindness. We recognize that their behavior likely stems from their own suffering, and we choose to wish them well instead of engaging in conflict. This doesn't mean we allow others to mistreat us, but it does mean that we don't allow their actions to disturb our inner calm. Practicing loving kindness also helps us deal with self-criticism. Often, we are our own harshest critics, and this internal negativity can deeply affect our sense of well-being. By extending loving kindness to ourselves, we can develop a more compassionate and gentle inner dialogue, reducing the impact of negative self-talk on our mental state. How to incorporate these principles in daily life? By understanding and incorporating these 4 additional principles, the middle way, karma, non-attachment, and loving kindness, into our daily lives, we can further strengthen our ability to remain unaffected by external circumstances. Here are some practical tips for applying these principles. Practice balance. In your daily decisions, seek the middle way. Avoid extremes and aim for a balanced, moderate approach in all aspects of life. Be mindful of your actions. Recognize that every action has a consequence. Take responsibility for your choices and act with intention, knowing that skillful actions lead to positive outcomes. Let go of clinging. Notice where you may be attached to outcomes, possessions, or identities. Practice letting go and embracing the impermanent nature of all things. Cultivate loving kindness. Set aside time each day to practice metta meditation, where you generate feelings of kindness toward yourself, loved ones, and even those with whom you have conflicts. By integrating these principles with the 4 previously mentioned, impermanence, non-self, mindfulness, and compassion, you can cultivate a resilient and peaceful mindset, ensuring that nothing in life has the power to disturb your inner serenity. 9. The principle of right view, samadhi. The right view, or samadhi, is the first step of the Noble Eightfold Path in Buddhism, which outlines the way to end suffering and achieve enlightenment. Right view refers to understanding reality as it truly is, particularly the 4 noble truths: that suffering exists, it has a cause, it can end, and there is a path leading to its cessation. This principle is essential because it shapes how we perceive the world, ourselves, and others. When we develop the right view, we begin to see the impermanent and interconnected nature of all things. This insight allows us to transcend our ordinary way of perceiving life which is often distorted by ignorance and attachment. Instead of reacting to life's challenges with confusion, frustration, or fear, right view encourages us to recognize the deeper truths of existence and respond with wisdom. For example, if you face a difficult situation, such as the loss of a job or a relationship, right view reminds you that suffering is an inevitable part of life, but it is not permanent. By seeing the bigger picture, you can understand that this challenge, like all things, is subject to change and does not define you. This helps you stay grounded and reduces emotional upheaval when life doesn't go as expected. Right view also involves recognizing the law of cause and effect, karma, as well as the principle of non-self. With this understanding, we can approach life with greater clarity, knowing that our reactions to external events are largely influenced by our own mental states and perceptions. By cultivating a clear and accurate view of reality, we reduce the power that external circumstances have to shake us. The principle of equanimity, upekkha. Equanimity, or upekkha, is a crucial principle in Buddhist teachings that refers to a state of mental calmness, balance, and composure, especially in the face of difficult situations. It is the ability to remain even-minded and serene no matter what happens around you. Equanimity is one of the four sublime states, Brahma Viharas, alongside loving-kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, and sympathetic joy, mudita, and it is considered the highest form of mental discipline. Equanimity doesn't mean indifference or detachment in a negative sense. Rather, it signifies a deep inner strength that allows you to remain centered regardless of external fluctuations. By cultivating this principle, you learn to treat both pleasant and unpleasant experiences with the same level of acceptance without getting caught up in emotional highs and lows. For example, imagine receiving praise at work, followed by criticism from a colleague. Without equanimity, you might feel elated by the praise and devastated by the criticism, allowing your mood to swing wildly based on external feedback. With equanimity, however, you can maintain a steady mental state, recognizing that both praise and criticism are impermanent and do not define your worth. This balanced approach prevents external events from having too much control over your inner peace. Equanimity is also deeply connected to the understanding of impermanence, anicca. By recognizing that all things, including emotions and external situations, are constantly changing, we can remain more composed in the face of challenges. This calm state of mind allows us to respond to difficulties with wisdom, rather than reacting impulsively out of fear, anger, or attachment. Practical steps for cultivating right view and equanimity develop. Right view. Begin by reflecting on the Four Noble Truths and the nature of suffering. Try to see your life circumstances through the lens of impermanence and interconnectedness. Understand that suffering is a natural part of life, but it is also temporary and can be overcome with the right mindset. Practice equanimity. When you find yourself in a challenging situation, pause before reacting. Take a moment to observe your emotional response without judgment. Remind yourself that both good and bad experiences are fleeting. Try to maintain a calm, balanced perspective, knowing that you have the inner strength to face whatever comes. By integrating these two additional principles, right view and equanimity, along with the earlier teachings, you can continue to build a resilient and peaceful mind that remains unaffected by the inevitable ups and downs of life.